All week long, I have actually been thinking about one particular famous but obscure Bible text. And I looked at it over and over again to gain a little bit of insight for tonight's sermon. The text comes from the book of Numbers, not this week's Torah portion. It is an important narrative for our modern world. You see, according to this story, Balaam was a non-Hebrew part-time prophet for hire. And he was enlisted by the king, Balak, king of the Moabites, to curse the Israelite people. Balaam journeys to the top of a mountain above the Jewish encampment, and he tries to utter a curse, but only a blessing comes out of his mouth. So from a distance, he gazes down at the encamped Israelites spread below him far into the distance, and he wondrously announces his curse, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov. How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob. It's a strange story, but that may be one of the very first examples of anti-Semitism in the Torah. In that case, thankfully, God prevents Jew-hating Balak and his accomplice Balaam from achieving their goal of demeaning or destroying the Jewish people. Unfortunately, as we now understand, not every anti-Semite has that same fate. This week, if you're like me, we've all been focused on the reality of anti-Semitism in our world as we remember the horrific murder of 11 Jews who were worshiping at Shabbat morning services at the Tree of Life congregation in Squirrel Hill, Pittsburgh. 6 others were wounded and countless more forever changed by that act of terror. And sadly, the curse of that hateful murderer who screamed, "All these Jews must die," was not uttered as a blessing. And the same is true of the ugly anti-Semitic Twitter post from a famous rap star last week, whose curse to go DEFCON 3 on Jewish people landed clumsily for him, as he has now been dropped by nearly all of his endorsement deals and his business partners. And all of those reactions were an attempt somehow to turn his curse into a blessing, making it clear that very few people would defend his hateful words. Sadly, though, that isn't the case. The impact of his vitriol has already left its mark. There is no blessing to be found. Among the scariest responses took place on a busy highway overpass in Los Angeles, where an anti-Semitic hate group was photographed unfurling a series of banners reading, "Honk if you think Kanye is right about the Jews." Members of that posse posed for pictures, holding their arms up in the form of a Nazi salute. And that may not even be the most frightening thing about this most recent, blatant anti-Semitism. Just take a few minutes yourself to read the comments about this event on any news website or social media platform. Kanye West has over 31 million followers on Twitter, more than twice the number of Jews in the entire world, and it seems that many of them agree with his disgusting rhetoric. And even with the backlash against him personally, the disease that was seeded by him this week is like a virus, replicating at an alarming rate. His words have not been transformed into a blessing, nor has the promise to open up Twitter to more lenient standards concerning bigotry in every form made things any better. But one journalist this week offered a slightly different understanding. Bret Stephens, in his New York Times editorial yesterday, saw things very different. He offered a bit of sarcastic gratitude to Kanye West by suggesting that with a few outbursts in just a few days, you've probably done more to raise public awareness about the persistence, prevalence, and nature of anti-Semitism than any other recent event. Concluding the article, Bret Stephens acknowledges that Kanye West speaks for more people than many Americans would have cared to admit. He ends by saying, for that, but only for that, Kanye, you deserve our thanks. A personal story. When I was 10 years old, there was a boy who rode the bus and got off at the same stop every day after school. Several days in a row, he whispered under his breath that I was a stupid Jew as we walked opposite directions to our houses in the same neighborhood. I came home and told my father about what was happening, and he immediately took me into our family's garage, and he taught me how to throw a punch. Right at his nose, my dad demanded. Once, he sternly explained. So the next day, I did it. One punch, to the nose, on its mark, 3 days in detention. The boy never spoke to me again. But honestly, looking back with a bit of maturity, I realize now that fighting back with violence still didn't turn that boy's words into my blessing. It doesn't mean that there's no course of action, though, today. We must act. We must use our communal strength and our resilience to respond somehow. Because if we don't, the growing anti-Semitism about which we are all hearing will only become worse. Just this morning, I had the chance to meet with the new CEO of the American Jewish Congress, Ted Deutch. The AJC, along with the Anti-Defamation League, are two of the most important national organizations working to combat anti-Semitism domestically and abroad. And here are a few of the suggestions that he shared with us that all of you can take right now, today, immediately after services. The first response is that we must all become educated about anti-Semitism, its roots in history, the current statistics, and how to respond. Only with a very deep knowledge of the origins of that plague can we combat hatred in our future. So as a first step, you might want to take a few minutes tonight to check out a recent class that I offered here at Temple Israel, which was a brief history of anti-Semitism. It's available on our Temple Israel YouTube page. Or, if you want to dive more deeply into the roots of the problem, I'm going to suggest that you read recent books like Dara Horn's People Love Dead Jews, or Bari Weiss's How to Fight Anti-Semitism. Both of those books elegantly explain exactly what our enemies think and feel. Another powerful work is Bernard Lewis's Semites and Anti-Semites. It examines the psychology of conflict and prejudice and will help you understand what's happening around us. Each of those authors can give us tools that we all need to understand our aggressor and to respond to the ugly attacks well. If the internet is your vibe, instead of reading longer books, check out and log into the websites of the ADL or the AJC. They are poised to record, report, and reverse the trends of Jew hatred in our world. There is amazing programming online, available for all of us to use immediately to teach our children, to speak to friends or colleagues who don't fully understand the problem, or in our personal activism in defense of Judaism. Beyond education, though, we must take steps to make institutions like Temple Israel stronger. You see, one of the goals of the anti-Semite is to force us to participate in our own demise. That is exactly why it is so important to dedicate yourselves anew to the Jewish community as a whole. Just as Rabbi Yedwab argued in his high holiday message on Kol Nidrei, I believe that congregational strength is one of the antidotes to the poison of anti-Semitism. So I'm asking you tonight, make the decision to attend one program at Temple Israel every month for the coming year. But don't do it alone. Bring someone else to show strength in our numbers. Let us all show the haters that we are strong and vibrant and not going away. This is the power in who we are as a community. And it is a power that can only be harnessed if we all decide to showcase our might together. Tonight, I am here to suggest that we cannot be silent. We cannot be timid, and we cannot be violent. But we can be educated, we must be engaged, and we will be eternal. How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob. How magnificent are your dwelling places, O Israel. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will for our future. Amen.